Welcome to Open Waters. If you're watching this video directly after its release, this map will be in the current ladder rotation. And if you're watching this later, it may have rotated out, but it will still be in the larger pool of possible ladder maps that are eventually going to rotate back in. So learning how to play this map is going to be great for your ladder career. This map is dominated by Airlock. Airlock is about building up a time and scale-based production lead in interceptors and sending them to the enemy side of the map before your enemy has expanded with a T1 transport. Your interceptors are going to win against the enemy interceptors because you have more and you micro them carefully. Your scouts are going to help you by spotting the enemy interceptors. If your opponent is foolish enough to go for an early bomber or transport from second air, you simply shoot it down as well. The only way for your opponent to recover from airlock is to invest into surface-to-air weaponry. Can be T1 mobile anti-air, can be a T1 stationary anti-air turret. This is when you avoid damaging your aircraft by setting up an interceptor perimeter around the enemy island rather than flying directly above it. Just don't leave any obvious gaps. Then the opponent will try to scale up their air production to get back into the air game. The problem with this is twofold. First, because air is power expensive and power generators are mass expensive, and mass spots are scarce in the starting location, a time and scale-based production lead is usually going to beat the attempt to achieve a later scale-based production lead in interceptors. I'm saying there's no way to really recover from airlock unless the airlocking player makes a mistake in the execution. Second, even in the worst case scenario, the airlock will at least have bought enough time to get your own T1 transport and drop engineers in one of the two side expansions. This way, you're going to have your ACU in one side expansion and your engineers in the other, so that you're going to have one expansion for sure and the other is going to be contested by you and your opponent's ACU. And what about middle? You usually send one of your early engineers to the middle, and since your airlock is going to give you at least temporary air control, if your opponent also has an engineer there, you can just bomb it. In summary, you're going to get a lot of mass income thanks to your map control, and you can get T2 air, large-scale hover, large-scale T1 navy, or small-scale T2 navy. It's probably best to go for any of these options except T2 navy, magnify your starting advantage further, and then get T2 navy from a safe position. And now let's talk about the build order. Alright, so we are going to open with a modified Hydro Rush. Modified because we also get an extra power generator. And you can build this power generator right after the construction of your land factory before your first mass extractor. Or you can build this in between your first and your second mass extractor. Both is an option because none of these build orders stalls. And typically we get some reclaim from trees and rocks over here. So if you want to go for a higher power start by building this power generator first and then this mass extractor, then you would just reclaim a few more rocks, and otherwise you would reclaim a few more trees. The first engineer is going to construct this hydro, and you can see that there's a tree on the hydro, and this tree is actually blocking the hydro construction site, which is why the engineer is going to have to get really close, reclaim the tree, and then can build the hydro before it builds all the other stuff. On the top slot, you don't have this problem because this tree is not actually blocking the hydro construction site. That's some minor map imbalance. So top slot has a small advantage here. And as you can see, the ACU is also going to have to reclaim some stuff because rocks and trees are blocking the power generator and the air factory construction site. After it's done reclaiming, it can assist the hydro building engineer as well. And this is also going to assist the power generators in the air factory. The second engineer goes here. It reclaims some trees and rocks on the way. Already reclaimed some here, now again here. And this is the 3 mass extractor expansion. So you can see there's a 3 mass extractor expansion and a 2 mass extractor expansion. And because the 3 mass extractor expansion is better, you want to get this one first and the other one later. That's why the second engineer goes here and the third engineer goes here. All remaining engineers are going to assist the hydro, power generator, and air factory constructing engineering ACUs. We're going to reuse the 3 mass extractor expansion building engineer to claim the center, You can make a point defense here, you can make a radar here, you can make a factory here. Factory, especially if you play a hover faction such as Aeon and Seraphim. It's really up to you if you want to get anything on this island to keep it safer, to benefit from it intel-wise, or to attack from there. Just be careful not to suicide Tier 1 hover into enemy frigates if you want to do this. The ACU is leaving the base. The exact timing of when it leaves depends on your eco. So there has been a time where I was almost power stalling because the ACU and 5 engineers have been assisting this factory. And I realized that's too power expensive, so I moved my ACU away. Watch your eco bars and move it away as soon as it gets too expensive. And then it can construct all mass extractors in this expansion, and it can build 2 factories. One of them is going to build engineers that can construct the hydro and some radar, and the other is going to build tanks. You can switch the other one into tanks later as well, in case you need that. In case you notice that you need more. Now about the composition on the air factory, you want to open with a scout because this is going to allow you to identify the enemy setup. If they want to go second air transport first, then it's super important that you find the transport and shoot it down with your interceptors. And the scout is going to spot this transport. If they do something out of the box, you can also find out thanks to the scout. And if the opponent is also going for airlock, but typically a slower airlock than yours, because 5 power generators, 1 in the base and hydro, allows for a lot of assist, and most people don't get so much. Then you would of course use your interceptors to like attack enemy interceptors and target them directly. And that's how you can still win with this build order. After 2 or 3 interceptors, I recommend to get another scout, because the first scout usually dies very fast. You still have to get it. This is just your condition to use your interceptors in the first place. You never send them in blindly. But to retain some extra vision spot, extra targets and so on, you want to get a second scout later on as a follow-up. Now there has been a power stall. This was because of the construction of the transport. And I don't think you can avoid power stalling during transport construction. You could move some engineers away to reclaim, but the reclaim is relatively far away, so there's not a lot of benefit in that. You could just pause the engineers and not power stall, but in any case I don't think the short power stall really matters. You can just accept it, and then you get this transport. And note how there is a light assault pod in this transport. This is a pretty nice light assault pod because well, I had this queued up after 11 engineers. You don't necessarily have to build 11. You would base it on the exact timing of your transport. If you notice, your airlock works out very fast because your opponent went for a transport instead of interceptors. Then you can get your own transport sooner because you have total air control. But if the opponent is also making interceptors and you're still fighting, then you should not build the transport, because that's going to be a liability if this gets shot down, or you simply have less interceptors because of it. But as soon as you have this transport going, you can go for a very greedy expansion style, because with a successful airlock there is nothing that could shoot down the transport. No interceptors to kill it, and no bombers to bomb the engineers. And that's why you can spread out the engineers across so many places. You would drop 1 here, maybe 2 here, and well, I like to drop 2 here, because in this particular sandbox I assumed that my scout found out that the enemy ACU is going underwater to this expansion. And if I build 2 point defenses and a radar here, and maybe a factory, then I can deny this expansion to the enemy ACU. And some people actually die to this sort of stuff. When they run into the expansion, don't notice, and then you have some submarines here that can finish off the ACU very fast. That sometimes actually happens. Speaking of submarines, as an Aeon player, I like to open with a submarine on this map, because if I go for a frigate, I usually need 2 frigates to win the frigate battle. My frigate is just not as good as the frigate of other factions, and that's why going for a submarine is the safer option. And because I'm opening with a submarine, I also have only 1 engineer constructing naval factories. So you see 2 engineers constructing naval factories here. Well, I think I constructed 2.5 naval factories with just 1 engineer, and the other was added way later. And typically this is fine, because if your opponent goes first land, second air, third navy, and builds the naval factory with 2 engineers, and you build yours with 1 engineer, then your first submarine and your second naval factory are both going to be complete by the time the first frigate from the enemy naval factory, built by the 2 engineers, is going to be in your base. So this frigate may be able to kill the 1 naval building engineer. If you retreat it first, then nothing happens, but even if that one dies, that's usually not a big loss. You get the reclaim from the frigate because your submarine can kill the frigate, and the frigate has no realistic chance at killing more naval factories because of how tanky these naval factories are. The submarine is going to be faster at killing it. And I'm going to build submarines for a while until I have naval dominance thanks to these, and then I switch into frigates later that can raid some coast mass extractors. Note that I also have some bombers, because if the airlock actually worked out, I'm going to have air control, and I can use the bombers to bomb any engineers the opponent has here that are trying to assist or construct or upgrade naval factories. And I reused the transport from over here. Like, this was the transport that expanded to this island, and I loaded 6 engineers into it, and in a real game I would drop these next to a naval factory. You know how the build time of a naval factory, when you build with just 1 engineer, is 1 minute, and if I have 6 engineers in a transport that all reclaim the same naval factory, it's going to be reclaimed within 10 seconds, and chances are there's not going to be a frigate around every 10 seconds, so you can get away with reclaiming a naval factory, and the half-finished ship inside it will die as well. So this is going to give you around 70-80% map control as a sort of build, and you have air control. You also have naval superiority if you do some smart submarine play, and well, you're going to have 1 expansion for sure. You can build tanks on it. If you play a hover faction, these can also attack, and well, same for the other expansion. One of the expansions may be contested by the enemy ACU, but the enemy is not going to have a transport in either expansion usually. And you control the middle, because holding the middle when you have naval and air control is actually quite easy. And from this position you can easily get T2 air to finish off your opponent. You can eco a little bit and get T2 navy, and you can also get large-scale hover tanks. So I hope this build was helpful, and I suggest this should be the standard way of playing this map, if you don't know what else to do. There are some creative ways of countering airlock. One of them is going first air transport first. This is quite risky because you're going to be stuck with a single factory, and you can only construct the other one later. So the ACU typically stays in the base for a bit longer, and you have less engineers in your transport. If your opponent scouts this and shoots this down, then this is going to suck. A bomber can kill these engineers too. But if your opponent doesn't scout, and I simply forgot my first scout in this game, then this can work out extremely well. You can see how Zlo is spreading out his engineers because he's perhaps expecting a bomber. So you can really see how this is risky, and how this is sometimes difficult to pull off.